I now want to bring in Van Turner, president of the NAACP Memphis branch, and civil rights attorney David Henderson. Van, I want to start with you and just say that our thoughts are with your community as you continue to mourn and start the process of trying to hold each other up in this incredibly painful moment. How is the community holding up? What is the mood there, particularly in the wake of this weekend's peaceful protests, but now that the video is really starting to sink in?
I mean, the mood is still one of disgust, anger, disappointment. The fact that these were African-American officers and Tyre Nichols was African-American, it begs the question, how could they do this to another Black man? And so these are the questions that are being asked. This is the turmoil that we're all going through. We're yet again on the national spotlight. Nationwide protests are breaking out. And the last time that we saw this was 55 years ago when Dr. King was assassinated here at the Lorraine Motel. So it's been tough. And we are hopefully using this as a call to action to move the agenda forward. I think that we need the federal legislation. I know that some may think that it's not a possibility, but that doesn't mean we don't try. We need to also seek legislation here in our state General Assembly. So we're going to work towards that end on behalf of the NAACP.
David, on that point of action that you would like to see taken, I was obviously just speaking with our reporter Ali Vitale about the George Floyd policing bill, and it included a number of proposals from qualified immunity to banning chokeholds and most no-knock warrants. Are those the types of reforms that you want to see? What do you think needs to happen to prevent another Tyre Nichols from losing his life like this?
100%. Those are the types of reforms that I want to see. Those are the types of reforms that we need to have to prevent this from happening again. And it's worth noting that we've had many conversations in recent years about similar incidents like this. Nothing has happened to prevent them. So it's really hard to listen to Representative Jordan, as we heard in the opening segment, say that it should be left at the local level when it has been left at the local level and people are still being wrongfully killed by the police, even in instances like this where they're being murdered by the police. We're talking about Dr. King just a moment ago. I work with one of the last living links to Dr. King, and part of our moral responsibility as civil rights lawyers is to maintain hope. That's really difficult when we start to talk about police reform, because the simple truth is there's not much room for negotiation here. You have to eliminate qualified immunity if you want to see a change. You have to limit chokeholds, but more importantly, you have to limit a tool that police officers use that they refer to as pain compliance, which is essentially state-sanctioned torture. Something that you refer to as pain compliance should per se be unconstitutional, but it is not.
Well, and we're both talking about changes at the federal level. The one change we have seen at the local level is that the police department in Memphis has disbanded the Scorpion unit. Now, we know that these are units all across the country, and one of the concerns is that you have some veteran officers who are aging out. They're bringing in new people, concerns that they're not getting the training that they need. David, does disbanding the Scorpion unit go far enough? What more needs to happen?
No, disbanding the unit does not go far enough. And here's the problem that I have with celebrating that too much. They created the unit. They recruited the officers who became part of the unit. They supervised or failed to supervise the unit, and they sent them out on the street with an admission to be aggressive on crime whenever they believed they encountered it. So they are cleaning up a mess that they created. And here's the problem. All the officers in that unit who received the training that led to them being in the Scorpion unit in the first place are now going to be dispersed throughout the police department. So if you don't do anything to change the culture of what led them to be part of that unit in the first place, what good does simply disbanding the unit do if there's going to be no level of accountability when they behave the same way, just another context within the same police department?
Van, can you weigh in on that point? What was your reaction to hearing that the Scorpion unit had been disbanded, and what do you want to see happen, not just at the local level, but in police departments all across the country?
Well, as was stated, the disbanding of the Scorpion unit was important, but the culture is still there. So there has to be a disruption, a disbanding of this culture in law enforcement, which allows these law enforcement agents to go into Black and brown communities and think that good policing is pulling folks out of their cars without the probable cause. and using tactics that should not be used in order to force some type of compliance. And as we see here, Tyre Nichols had done nothing wrong. And he asked, what have I done? And so I think we have to change the culture. We have to double down on the training. We have to eliminate all of these specialty units with the tactical gear and the philosophy that they are going to war on our communities. They're there to serve and protect, not to make war on the community.
Van,
we, like all communities, want crime addressed, but we don't want innocent people killed.
Van, I want to follow up on something that you started to talk about, which is that all 5 of the officers who've now been charged are African American. They were charged before the video was put out. Ben Crump, who is the attorney for the family, spoke about this. He said, okay, fine, but now this needs to be the blueprint. I want to play for you what he had to say and get both of your reaction on the other side.
When we look at how these 5 black officers who were caught on camera committing a crime, and when we look at how fast the police chief and the police department terminated them, and we look at how swiftly the district attorney brought charges against them in less than 20 days, then we want to proclaim that this is the blueprint going forward.
Reaction, is it realistic? And part of what he is essentially saying is whether the officers are white, brown, whatever race, wherever their background is, they should be held to this standard. Is that realistic, David?
No, not across the board. In terms of what we expect to see in other cities, and let me say this very clearly, I agree with what Attorney Crump said. I agree this should be the blueprint. What I have to be honest with myself in assessing is you've got a blueprint, but no funding or direct plans to actually build the house. And you also have to keep in mind, if we want to have change, we want to be positive and hopeful, we also have to be realistic in terms of what is happening. Memphis is trying to protect itself. We saw the same thing in the trial of the murder of George Floyd. The police department appeared to be more transparent. It's actually trying to protect itself. Memphis knows the only real form of police reform we have right now is the current Justice Department. The Justice Department will come and start investigating what's going on in Memphis and eventually create a consent decree if Memphis doesn't take some steps to get out in front of it. And so that is what they are trying to do right here. Something that is worth noting that goes along with what he said, though. Not only did they take swift action to indict these officers, but it is ironic that these officers, if they're convicted of the crimes that they are charged with, will face a higher level of punishment for their crimes than we have seen any police officers face in the modern era and possibly in history. I'm not aware of an example of an officer being convicted and potentially serving 60 years. That's almost 3 times what Derek Chauvin served for murdering George Floyd.
Van, final thought to you. We only have a few seconds left, and what you want to see from the president and the White House from this.
Well, we want to see what he said he's going to do. We want to see a big push towards passing the George Floyd Reform Act. I know that he's invited the family to the State of the Union. Hopefully this will be a call to action from the president to make the type of change, the lasting change that we need here in this country. We want it, we need it, and I believe the country needs it and wants it as well.
Thank you for this critical conversation, Van Turner and David Henderson. We really appreciate your joining us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.